Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. I'm Executor Bubbles, bringing you another episode of Wonderful Wednesdays. Now, if you like the content that I've been putting out, I'd really appreciate it if you could go down below and give me a like, leave me a nice comment, and maybe even subscribe to the channel. It's going to really help to grow this community as well as this program. But before we get started today, I reached out to a good friend of mine to see if he was willing to join me on the show and join me on the internet. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to introduce to you all Norbert the Monster. Hey there, Norbert. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Bubbles. How's things been?
Ah, man. The last two episodes have been pretty rough. I'm still getting, the hang of things over here. Definitely nervous in front of the camera because we're on the internet. And, I gotta say, this whole YouTube thing has been a great learning opportunity for me, and I've been having a lot of fun. Most importantly, though, I think I've really been enjoying putting out these great stories and this good news for everybody.
Hey, Bubbles. Let's get to sharing these stories, will you? I'm getting bored.
All right. Now, to get us started this week, I wanted to keep a lot of that positivity back here in the U.S. With all that's been going on, we need to remind ourselves, and each other, especially the rest of the world, America is still full of wonderful people. If you turn on the news these days, it may not really seem like it now, but we all still, and we'll always be, the home of the free, the land of the brave. But please join us as we look across the country this week and find us some real everyday heroes.
Everyday heroes.
Our first story this week takes us out to a bakery and coffee shop out in Minnesota, whose owner has found a wonderful path to keep himself and his staff busy despite facing an incredible drop in business. Bill Hanish, the owner of Hanish Bakery and Coffee Shop out in Red Wing, Minnesota, has taken it upon himself to bake individual cakes for the 2020 graduates in several towns around his area. What motivated Bill to get baking on the wide, you might ask? Well, let's hear it from Bill himself in an interview he did with ABC.
Bill Hanish, owner of the Hanish Bakery and Coffee Shop, joins us now from Minnesota. Bill, thank you so much for being with us, and tell us what inspired you to give away these free personalized cakes to all the seniors in your town.
Well, just community pride, really. I wanted to make sure that these kids had a graduation that was, as memorable as I remember mine. And with them losing out on so many events and things throughout their senior year, I just felt like I needed to step up and do something for them.
Well, I can only imagine what happened once word got out what you were doing. Tell us what the response was.
Well, it was quite good. It spread from one town to the next town to, I believe we're at, 15 total towns. And we've actually had to turn some towns away just because we can't possibly produce that many cakes.
Yeah, how many cakes are we talking about, and how have you been able to handle so many orders all at once?
Well, it's going to be close to 1,200 total cakes by the time the month is over. It started with 200 and went from there. We were able to handle it because we normally handle these volumes, and right now our volumes on a lot of things are very low. So, we just worked with the schools and set up a schedule, and my employees are absolute rock stars and got them all done.
What flavor are those cakes? Are they all different kinds of flavors? I need details.
Well, if they're coming here from Red Wing, my hometown here, they get a choice of chocolate, white, or marble. For other schools, we have kind of went with just a white cake, just to keep it simple for not only us, but also for the teachers and the faculty that are handing out these cakes.
Oh my gosh, they look so good. I'm watching your amazing bakers and chefs putting those together, and my mouth is watering. All right, so ultimately, near 1,200 cakes you will have made. How does it make you feel to bring so many smiles to people who need it more than ever right now?
It's awesome, to see the thank you cards that we have received from all over the country that, people wanting our cakes from all over the country, but just to go to some of these smaller towns, maybe it's like 15 kids graduating, and just really, you see them get the cake and the smile just lights them up, and it's awesome. Just to, and the community support that it's brought is even more special to me in this time right now.
Oh, well, that is amazing. Bill Hanish of Hanish Bakery and Coffee Shop, thank you so much. What an incredible way to uplift your community at a time when we all needed it more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Han's story is so refreshing and wonderful to hear. His motivation was just to give the 2020 graduates a memorable high school graduation experience. Just kind of like how he had when he graduated. I remember when I graduated high school, it was a good time. There wasn't much, that we actually had to worry about, that I had to worry about. Like lots of bills, work. You guys are going to have a lot of wonderful things to look forward to. Ha! Joking. Still going to be a lot of fun though, guys. But yeah, thank you, Mr. Hanish, for sharing your aloha with those in your area. Keep it up, buddy. Good job.
Hey, Bubbles, not a bad one, that one. That must have cost him a whole lot of dough, though. Why would anyone do that?
Well, Norbert, sometimes you do what you can and you give what you're able to, not because you're expecting anything in return, but because you want to share some of that positivity. In my life, I found that you often get a lot more than you give. Giving really heals the soul, and for me, that's especially what I found. Well, this brings us to our next story. Going to the early stages of the coronavirus pandemic, there are some crazy pictures and news stories out there about farmers that were plowing their own fresh crops, dumping tons of milk due to a significant decrease in demand from very specific vendors like restaurants and stadiums. As college campuses closed due to the pandemic, 3 friends came together to come up with a very elegant solution. Aiden Riley, James Canoff, and Will Collier, they were really appalled that farmers were plowing under fresh vegetables, dumping milk. Why were they wasting all this food, especially when food banks were in great need of food?
Why would they dump and plow through totally good food?
Well, Norbert, they had to because they couldn't afford to pay workers to harvest the crops, package them, or even transport them to those who needed them. Let's hear a little bit about what they did to tackle this huge problem from Mr. Canoff himself in an interview he did with ABC News.
A lot of people have struggled to feed their families during the pandemic and shut down, so some local college students found a solution. And now their grassroots program is going nationwide. Lori Corbin looks at how FarmLink connects farms to food banks.
Like many college students, James Canoff was stunned as he watched how farms had to waste and dispose of crops while people went hungry during the pandemic.
We saw, these images of millions of gallons of milk going to waste, of hundreds of thousands of eggs being smashed, entire produce fields that were being plowed under. We just wanted to say, let's just connect one farm to our local food bank. And if we can do that, maybe that's a model that then we can bring to other places.
It's now a model known as FarmLink. The idea, started by a handful of philanthropic students from Stanford, now expanded into a nationwide movement.
We're now up to around 100 people who are working on the team, and we have about 2,000 volunteers.
Canoff says getting the farmers on board at first was tough.
What they told us is, look, who's going to pay, the wage of the farm worker to actually, go pick this crop? Who's going to pay, the cost of the packaging? Who's going to pay for the transport, the wage of the truck driver to actually get it off the farm and into the food bank?
They received small donations from family and friends, rented refrigerated trucks, and did a lot of driving themselves. Now this nonprofit is able to hire professional drivers and harvesters.
As yesterday, we just donated our 1 millionth pound of food.
One thing Canoff said that the farmers said nationwide, when possible, keep it local.
If you're a grower, you want to help your local community. It's not right, to drive a truck 500 miles down the road when just, 30 minutes, down the road, there's a community that is really in need of help.
The need for volunteers and donations remains. Canoff says he sees this as a challenge that won't be leaving us anytime soon.
It's everywhere where there, is there's produce. We want to work with you. So if you're a farmer, reach out to us. We can help.
Wow, man. Great job to Aiden, Will, James, and the rest of the FarmLink crew. Keep it up, guys.
Wow, Bubbles. That was such a huge feat. And a lot of work. Why would they even do that?
Well, it was a very big task, and they were able to solve the problem, which I believe for them was connecting the gap between farms and the food banks. With some good old elbow grease and a bunch of volunteers and donations, they got the job done. You know, when people care enough, I don't think anything's impossible. Especially with a lot of people, you can get a lot accomplished.
Do they teach you this sort of stuff in JCI, Bubbles?
Of course, Norbert. It takes a lot of us all over the world doing all these sorts of things to make the world a better place. I'm very proud to serve with JCI as an active JCI member. All right, Norbert, are you ready to put on your thinking cap? I promise it's just going to be a few minutes. I'm going to try my best not to ramble on for years like I normally do.
Are you sure? You got really bad ADHD, bro.
Yes, I'm sure. If not, I'll catch you a beer later.
Okay, fine. What you got for me this week?
Remember last week we were talking about some of the root causes that's causing all of this craziness in America? Well, these days, the police are taking a lot of heat, and I wanted to spend a little bit of time analyzing some of the elements to the situation so that we could all start thinking about sustainable solutions to these issues.
What about it? I guess that would make sense. It's really hard to protest now.
Like I said before, peaceful protesting still helps to create positive change, and those that are doing it are doing a great job. Us, though, I think we fill a different role. While people are out there exercising their rights, for us, I'm just going to say, hey, let's exercise our brains. Is that cool? Before we get into it, let's first take a listen to an interview with Valuetainment's Patrick B.T. David. He did an amazing interview with Sheriff Mark Lamb, the 24th Sheriff of Pinal County and star of popular show Live PD, for some excellent insight on the current topic regarding the situation with law enforcement.
This was a travesty. Nobody dislikes a bad cop more than a good cop. This was a travesty for the entire country. And this was actually something where the entire country was on the same page. We all thought this was awful. And then I think that with what we've seen with the rioting and the looting, I think we've lost the opportunity, or at least we've made it very difficult to really take that where the whole country was on the same page. We lost that opportunity. And now it's, once again, law enforcement, we're trying to recover that. And we're trying to get back to the table with everybody and reassure everybody that that is such a small percentage in law enforcement. It's unfortunate that it exists, but I don't care what industry you're in. There are bad people in every industry.
No question.
And we do the best we can to weed those people out. I would hope that everybody would give us the opportunity to get back to the table. And this riot and looting and what's going on in Washington, this nonsense has to stop, because it is not helping the narrative. It's not helping what these people want to stand for. For those who want to really address the issues, this riotous behavior is not helping. We had a meeting here in our community where we met with community leaders. We got right to work, and we didn't just talk about it. We pulled them in, and we had a 4-hour conversation where we just talked heart to heart, and I let them vent, and I listened, and I really got a better perspective of a lot of things. And then we also had a lot of takeaways of what we can do better in our agency. That's what you should be seeing across this country. That's the type of dialogue. Honestly, my heart breaks for the Floyd family and for what happened. That was awful. But it's also awful what's been going on since then, and it needs to stop.
What is the right protocol in a situation like that? And how are the 4 officers held accountable? You have the 17-year-old who's recording it and, holding the cops accountable. And then you have the 4. So when you're saying it's awful, what is the proper protocol in that situation? Because we're not in that world.
And I don't like to armchair quarterback. That putting a knee in a back and in the neck that's not a technique or tactic we use here. And even if it was, it's definitely not something you use for 8.5 minutes. Now, everybody else standing around, they got charged. Well, what about the kid holding the camera that got charged? Well, look, he stood around just like the other cops. There were other people that just stood around. So there was a lot of people that should have stepped in and tried to stop this, whether they would have got arrested or not. It's about doing the right thing a lot of times. And I'm not trying to cast blame or take away from anything that happened, because what happened was awful. And you know what? We're seeing that those officers are going to be held responsible for it, and they should. And we need to let the court of law just do it, much like we should have let the court of law deal with George Floyd as well. It just was awful. There's no explanation for it. There's nothing I can say that will justify And you can't show me anything. And this is just me. There's nothing you can show me that would justify that action. What you should have done is once you had him in cuffs and you got him under somewhat control, they should have just sat him up, crossed his legs. He's got handcuffs on. He's not going to be able to do anything, or put him in the back of the car. Honestly, in most of those times, in those neighborhoods, wherever he's at, you want to scoop that guy up, put him in the back of the car, and get out of a volatile situation. And this is a prime example. That situation turned volatile. That guy sat on that guy, that officer sat on George Floyd for 8.5 minutes. It's so hard to watch. And it's I wish we could rewind it, but we can't. I tell the youth that I work with all the time, we cannot change the past. The only thing we can do is work for a better future.
Wow, that was a great interview. Thank you, Patrick from Valuetainment, as well as Sheriff Mark Lamb for the great insight. If you haven't watched the full interview, I'll leave a link down to his video in the description down below.
Ah, geez Louise. 8 minutes, 46 seconds. That was a real...
Norbert! We're on camera.
Ah, gotcha. Adult language filter on.
Hey, Norbert. Do you like that guy, Joe Rogan?
Of course I like Joe Rogan. Who doesn't like Joe Rogan?
Well, he just did a pretty amazing interview with Jocko Willink, a decorated retired Navy SEAL officer and author. Let's take a quick listen to a soundbite that I picked out from his interview.
We're failing to build relationships between the police and the civilians, and that causes that causes these problems.
I think you're 100% correct, but I don't hear anybody repeating what you're saying. That's what's terrifying to me. I think everything you're saying is logical. It makes sense. It comes from experience. I don't hear anybody saying this.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's because people just don't recognize what's happening because they're too in it, right? They're too in it. They're wrapped up in it, and that's another part. I talked about recruiting. Who are you recruiting? Recruit those kids. Recruit those kids, but you have to build a relationship with them before anyone's going to go into the police.
My only experience with cops was when I got a DUI.
See, that's why we need to have this kind of dialogue, and discussions, so we can all learn and improve ourselves, so we can have positive and sustainable change. I want my kids to grow up in better times than what we're seeing today, a better world.
You live in Hawaii, bro. Also, it's the same world.
Good point. But anyway, that doesn't mean we all can't do our part, eh? Moving on, I found another great clip all the way back from 2015, where Slate interviewed a former Baltimore cop, Michael Wood Jr., talking about his perspective on what's wrong in the world of policing. And this was following the death of Freddie Gray, another young black man who also died in police custody, which led to riots and mayhem back then as well. In this clip, he talks about the policies and expectations of the officers, that are laid out for them by legislators and enforced by their police superiors. Let's take a quick moment to listen to this portion of his interview.
Is there a path along which change can kind of travel?
What we have to do is we have to start thinking about what are we actually doing and what are our goals. So if our goals are to reduce violent crime, we have to change our metrics. So right now our metric is arrest. That's what judges an officer. So who's in charge of these metrics? It's command and it's politicians. So we have to change the metric to crime reduction, to justice, to problem solving. So that would be a continual metric where you would always have something to do, where you would always improve the community, because you should be focused on improving your post, not on locking up many of those people up on your post. Because if you're taking their freedom away, how are you not going to be their enemy?
Wow, doesn't seem like anything has changed since 2015, Bubbles.
Yeah, unfortunately, doesn't seem like anything changed at all, man. But what do you think, though? That perspective. I think as people continue to push and protest, for constructive change, people should also start looking and ask themselves, like, what do we want police officers to actually do? Do we want them simply handing out tickets and making more statistics? Or do we want them out helping to build and improve our communities while also reducing violent crimes? I agree with Michael Wood Jr. that if we change the metric and ask the appropriate questions, I think we can change the whole behavior and the expectations that we have on officers across America. it'll ultimately come down, to the policy enacted by our legislators that we'll vote for. A big thank you to Slate for hosting this interview back in 2015 with Michael Wood Jr. Your perspectives back then are still valid today. If you want to see this interview by Slate, I'll also leave a link to their full interview in the description down below.
Wow, that was a lot to take in. I need a beer now. Hey Bubbles, you think you share with me one more story? I feel like my monster head is spinning round and round.
Alright, fine. I got one more story to share with y'all that I've been saving in my back pocket just because it's so great and I think everybody would enjoy it. Our last story for today is one out of New York, where two best friends were sick and tired of hearing all that bad news in the riots and the protests that were going on here in the US. Benjamin Smith, a white Marine, and his best friend, Marcus Ellis, who's black, set up some lawn chairs in Ben's driveway, opened a few beers, and invited people that were passing by in their community over to chat and enjoy a beer. They invited them over to have some great dialogue, especially about the situation that's going on here in the US right now. Let's take a quick look at the clip from Fox.
Benjamin Smith explains why he wanted to do this.
I feel like through the rioting and the protests, I kind of felt like I was being torn apart, and it was rough.
Guitars. No, look at all those guitars.
Sorry.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah, right, bro. And this is what builds it back up.
Oh, that was pretty wonderful. Marcus and Ben, out there in New York, great job. Keep it up, guys. I believe, the more of this kind of thing that we can do in our communities, the better the world's going to eventually be. Having empathy, having compassion, those are the kind of things that make us human, and that is what we need more of. I believe so.
Yeah, I think so too. Can I have a beer yet? You owe me one, man.
Sorry, Norbert. We went a bit longer, than I expected, but I think we covered some really great stories and got some pretty good thinking done, especially with everybody out there. But, all right, let's start to wrap this one up. Thank you all for sticking with us all the way to the end of this video. This channel and all that we cover each week highlights all of you out there, the good people of the world. If you want to see any kind of different type of content or want to share any stories, please leave them in the comment section below. You can also share your stories with me directly at stories@ebubbleshi.com. As always, please hit the notification bell down below if you want to be notified when a new video comes out. And, you guys, I just can't say how much I appreciate all of you out there. Thank you to all of you who make these videos and this channel possible. Especially thank you to all of the heroes that we saw this week from the stories that we shared. Hey Norbert, you think you can make it again next week? I think it was pretty good fun having you here with me out here on the internet. I'll be sure to bring you a beer.
You got me a beer, bud.
Sounds good, man. All right, thanks everyone, and we'll see you all next week for another episode of Wonderful Wednesdays. And remember, if you're ever angry or upset, there's no angry way to say bubbles. Aloha.
Cut.
This world is so imperfect. It's full of pain and fear. Despite all the chaos, all the judgment, we know that so many of you are good. We forget how human we are, how human we all are, including you. and that among all this sacrifice, mistakes can be made, and bad people do exist. We know that a world without you would not be better, but far, far worse. And for that, we thank you. We know how much of your sacrifice goes unnoticed, and we know that the worst of you get the spotlight instead of the best. So many of you have given your lives to protect ours, to keep us safe. We will not stand by and let your work go unnoticed. We will speak truth.